Well, good morning, and to our friends joining us abroad, good evening. Welcome to Mirage Talks. Today's topic, building the value of your company through IP. I'd like to welcome a very dear friend of the Mirage Institute and also mentor, a shareholder at the law firm Butts Long, Ira Hoffman. Thank you so much for joining us today.
ערב טוב חבר'ה, גבירותיי ורבותיי, שמי אירה הופמן, כמו שקריסטי אמרה, אני מנטור של מיראז', אני גם שותף בפירמה בשם Butts Long, יש לי את הכבוד להכיר לכם, to introduce you to the person you came to hear, who is Aaron Camley, my partner, who's also in the Washington, D.C. office of Butts Long. Aaron, please take it from there.
Thanks very much. Welcome everybody, thanks for joining us. As you've been told, we're going to talk about building the value of the company through IP. This is a brief agenda. We're going to move through a few things kind of quickly, but there will be plenty of time for questions. So we're just going to start by talking about what intellectual property is, the types there are, talk a little bit about generally how you can use them to create value in your company, and then we'll have what everybody always wants to hear, some specific strategies which are based on but sanitized real case studies from real clients that I've helped over the years in IP. So,
Can everyone hear Aaron well?
yeah, good question.
Okay.
All right. Hearing no no's, we'll go on ahead. So just so you know that I know more or less what I'm talking about here, I've been an IP attorney my entire legal career. Before that, I was a physicist and a technologist. Been working in IP for 17 years, done everything you see listed there. I've had multiple Fortune 100 companies and handfuls of startups that I've helped from the time they first created up until they went public or were acquired or went on to good and great things. So very briefly, we'll start with what is IP. Again, we'll go through this pretty quickly. I know a lot of you probably are familiar with at least the basics of intellectual property. I find it helps to have a basis for this so we all know what we're talking about. Very briefly, around the world, these are the four main types of intellectual property. There are some other things around the edges, but these are the way we categorize things typically: copyright, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets. We'll go through each of these briefly on its own, and then I'll show you how they work together to build up your company. So briefly, what is a copyright? Copyright protects unauthorized copying of an exact work. It's in almost every country in the world. Copyright is automatic when you create a written work, a book, a screenplay, a song, these slides, pretty much anything that you could write down in any form obtains copyright protection. What is the copyright protection in this case? It lets you stop people from copying the exact thing that is copyrighted, or making minor changes to it and copying that. It protects the form of what you have made, so the exact words, the exact images that you put together. It doesn't protect the underlying subject matter. So if I write a book on the principles of physics, I have not copyrighted the principles of physics. I've only copyrighted my specific description of principles of physics. But in many cases, that's all you need. The top place that I've seen it used in my practice is for software code. And oftentimes the manuals that go along with that. Those are copyright. They can prevent somebody from copying the exact copyright. Now again, copyright doesn't prevent somebody from making a different piece of software written entirely from scratch that does the same thing. But it does prevent people from copying your exact software code verbatim and doing something else with it. So somebody can't get your code and sell it on as their own. If they do, they're infringing your copyright, and you have legal remedies against them. As I said, copyright protection is automatic. In most countries, you have to register it before you can enforce it, but you can register it at any point. You can register it today and sue somebody for copyright infringement tomorrow. There's no need to file ahead of time. There's no need to do it as you go. You can do it when it becomes necessary. Some places will register copyrights before they need to enforce, for one thing, to show their shareholders, their partners, potential investors, that they are taking steps to protect these things. And also, it gives you a log of the things that you have copyright protection for. This can be useful in very specific situations, where you need to keep track of which versions of our software have we protected? Which versions of our database schema have we protected, so that you know you're up to date as you go. The next type of IP is trademark. Most people are familiar with trademark in one form or another. You see the little TM or the little R that you see in the bottom right corner there, put after a trademark, or for services, a service mark also uses the circle in the R. The protection that trademark gives you is it lets you stop others from using a confusingly similar mark to yours. So some of those most famous trademarks in the world, Coca-Cola, the scripted words Coca-Cola with a dash between them. You couldn't have something that looks very similar to Coca-Cola, even if the words aren't Coca-Cola. I guarantee you Coca-Cola will be calling you up within a matter of days if you start using that. If you have Coca-Cola or something like that in the same script with the same fancy C's, they will call you. They will be able to stop you from using that, even though it's not exactly the same. The purpose of trademark protection around the world is to identify where goods or services come from. So it's not to give you a monopoly over, for example, selling cola, in the case of Coca-Cola. It lets you have a monopoly on saying these colas came from this same source, Coca-Cola, Diet Coke, Cherry Coke, all of those things have the Coca-Cola mark on them. So it doesn't protect the goods or services themselves, it protects the representation that these came from a common source. So in other words, you can stop somebody from riding on your tailcoats once you build up a brand, once you have worldwide recognition or local recognition of your brand. You can stop people from gaining a benefit from that on their own goods or services. Mostly see trademarks used to protect logos, names, your specific branding, even outside of the specific logo, specific names, and your specific packaging. All of those are appropriate uses of trademark protection. The next type of IP that we have, and again, going through these very quickly, we'll have time for questions, and we'll show how they all work together in a little bit. Patents are one of the most widely known and most commonly misunderstood forms of intellectual property. So patents basically protect inventions. Said in a nutshell, that's what it is. What's an invention? It's anything made up by humans that's new, useful, and non-obvious. But honestly, don't worry about useful and non-obvious. At a high level, a patent is when you've invented something new that people have not done before, have not seen before. Patent application gives you a government-granted monopoly over this new thing that you've created. The monopoly allows you to stop other people from making your invention, using it, selling it, importing it, any of that. It does not, however, and this is one of the most common misunderstandings of patents, it doesn't grant you a right to use your own invention. Now, that seems contradictory, right? How can it let you stop other people from doing it, but you can't do it yourself? And I'll give you the simple example. Imagine that your invention is a chair, right? It's a seat with some legs, it's got a back on it. You're the first one to ever come up with a chair. You have a patent on a chair. Anybody else makes a chair, you can say, hey, you can't do that. I own the patent on a chair. Stop selling chairs. That's mine. However, before you made your invention of a chair, somebody else may have invented a stool. It's a single support with a seat, no back on it, but they still invented that. Hidden inside every chair is a stool. So you have the right to stop people from selling a chair, but whoever has the patent on a stool can prevent you from selling this chair that hidden inside it is a stool. So patents can be overlapping in subject matter, but they do provide you with the right to stop anybody else from making, using, selling, importing your invention. Other people may have other patents that cover anything that's out there. Classic example these days is a cell phone, probably has several hundred patents that cover the cell phone and various components in the cell phone. Anybody that owns one of those patents can stop anybody from making, using, or selling a modern day cell phone. The people that own those patents don't have the right themselves to make the cell phone, which is why you end up with all these hundreds of cross-licensing patent deals where anybody who's making a cell phone probably has a license to hundreds of patents to do it. Patents are used for pretty much anything tangible, devices, compositions, and also methods and processes. If you have a new technique for making a composition or a new composition itself, patents can protect that as well. The one thing that's kind of in between those that's sort of semi-tangible these days is software. Most countries have some form of protection for software in their patent regime. it varies to a greater extent than other forms of patent protection. So a new device is protectable to the same extent pretty much everywhere in the world. A new piece of software is more protectable in some countries than in others. The major markets that most people care about around the world typically do have some protection for software. It just varies in how you formulate it and the extent of protection you have for it. The last form of IP that we have is trade secrets. Trade secret, the formal definition is there for you to read, and we'll have these slides available for you afterwards to go back and look at. But in short, a trade secret is something that is valuable because it's a secret. Again, borrowing Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola recipe is the most famous trade secret in the world. Supposedly only 3 people in the world know about it. There's a famous story where somebody allegedly stole it and attempted to sell it to Pepsi, and Pepsi called Coke and said, hey, somebody's trying to sell us what they claim is your secret recipe. Here it is. You might want to do something about that. And Pepsi did not actually get the recipe, supposedly. But the whole point of Coca-Cola's trade secret recipe is that no one else knows how to make it. As soon as it became known, there is essentially no other protection for the recipe at this point because it's been around for too long to have patent protection on it. It's not the sort of thing that's eligible for trademarks or copyrights other than writing out the recipe, but the contents of the recipe itself can't be protected with copyright. So if it became publicly known, it would lose an incredible amount of value for Coca-Cola at this point. So part of a trade secret is you take efforts to keep it secret. You tell people, hey, everybody in the company, this is a trade secret. Don't tell it to anybody else. So you see there, trade secrets are often used to protect the secret sauce that you have, you know, what it is that distinguishes your product that nobody else knows about. You can also use it to protect information that otherwise you might want to patent, but for some reason it's not patentable. Protect what we call back-end algorithms in software. That's algorithms that nobody could possibly tell you're using. For example, if you have a new web service that is using some very clever AI machine learning algorithm in the back end to produce results, but nobody can tell how it does what it's doing, you might protect that as a trade secret rather than publishing it in a patent application. All patents eventually become public. Once it's public, everybody can copy what you're doing once the patent runs out. Trade secrets last forever until they're disclosed. So you might want to keep those sorts of things as a trade secret instead of a patent. Proprietary data is often kept as a trade secret because that's, again, the only form of true protection available to it. If you have a lot of data you collected with a lot of effort that gives value to what you're doing, you can protect that as a trade secret and stop, if somebody else stole it and used it, you could have a remedy against them. Again, very briefly, all of the IP that I've mentioned is in its details country specific. So how a patent or a trademark works in Israel is going to be slightly different than how it works in the US, will be slightly different than how it works in Australia. But there are treaties that attempt to harmonize all of IP in most countries around the world, and all the major markets in the world in one form or another have signed on to these treaties. You'll hear the PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty for Patents, the Berne Convention for Copyrights, the Madrid Protocol for Trademarks. To one extent or another, these have harmonized IP in most countries around the world, either by letting you cross-file from one country to another, or saying, look, we'll put rules in place in our country that essentially match those in other countries so that you have some expectation of how these forms of IP work when you move from one country to another. This third bullet point here is an especially important one for patents and for certain inventions related to national security or military applications. Almost all countries have a statutory requirement that if your invention, or in some cases, even your trademark is somehow related to national security or a military endeavor, you have to file it in your home country first. That's not necessarily true if it isn't a national security invention. You might be able to file it wherever you want first. But they will insist that you file it essentially at home first so that they can review it and make sure it's the type of thing that they want exported to other countries. You may have, in the US, it's called a national security letter, national security secrecy order that says, we will give you patent protection for this, but you cannot file it outside the US, and it will remain unpublished until we decide it can be published. Israel has similar laws and similar requirements. Many other countries do as well. The strongest laws of the US, Israel, Germany have rules on when you can file outside the country. Typically, most people, when they're looking for where to file IP, patents, trademarks, are the ones most commonly filed, you look to file in the largest markets available. So for patents, a lot of times, most technologies, that's the US, sometimes Europe at the European Patent Office, sometimes depending on your business, that may be in China. It can vary on industry, but a lot of times you'll want to eventually, one way or another, get to those countries so that you have protection in those largest markets. Since IP law is country specific, a patent in the US won't let you do anything about somebody making your invention in Europe. You have to have a patent in the specific country in Europe that you want to stop people from using your invention. Here's a quick chart to compare the things people ask about the most for each of these types of IP. How quickly can I get it? When can I extend it to other markets? And especially, how much does it cost? So I'll go through these briefly, but I'll also put in the caveat, like all lawyers do, any of these estimates are very specific to individual situations. These are average ballpark estimates. Sometimes you can do it cheaper, sometimes it's more expensive, depending what you need. And I'll talk a little bit more about cost later on and how it ties into all this. But briefly, copyright, your protection is immediate. As soon as you create something, you have protection. You can extend it to other jurisdictions whenever you want. As soon as it's available in those countries, you essentially have protection there. Many countries under the Berne Convention, if you create something in Israel, it immediately has copyright protection in the US. It's global and immediate. The costs there, so since it's immediate and automatic, there's zero cost to get a copyright. To register it to the point where you can enforce it is, up to $2,000. Honestly, it can be as little as a couple $100 just to do the registration. To get everything, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, all the registrations done where you might want it, I usually quote $1,000 to $2,000 to get it in several countries and have attorneys do that. Trade secrets are very similar. It's immediate. As soon as you have something that you treat as a trade secret that brings value to your company by fact of being secret, you have protection for it. There's no limit to when you can get this in other countries. Again, in most countries, as long as you take those protections, it's immediate. Doing that is zero cost. All you need to do is make sure that you take the steps to protect it as a secret. I will say a lot of times, especially for startups, you want to have an intentional system to do this. You don't just want to say, well, this is our secret sauce, it's a trade secret. That might not hold up if someone were to steal it. You need to be able to demonstrate that you've taken steps to protect it. I've helped many startups write and enforce their policies internally on how to establish and protect and record trade secrets. That's usually a few $1,000s to have an attorney set that up and prepare it for you. Trademark, you can get relatively quickly. In most countries, it's 3 to 6 months. There's an asterisk there because I found out just over the past week that in the US and Europe anyway, for reasons no one has yet figured out, there has been lately, within the last few months, a huge backlog, a massive increase in the number of filings of trademarks. Nobody has seen any specific pattern to it. It just seems that more people are interested in getting trademarks. And maybe as people come out of the pandemic, there's more businesses starting, there's more things that were put on hold picking back up. A lot of times trademark filings are one of the earliest things you do for this. So that might have something to do with it. So usually 3 to 6 months. These days in the US and Europe, we're seeing that extend to about 6 months before they start examining it, which means maybe 9 months to a year before you actually have the protection. You can extend trademarks to other countries within 6 months of your filing to get the original filing date priority, but there's no requirement to do that. You can file it after 6 months. You just don't get the early filing date. For trademarks, that's not usually determinative, although it does give people a chance to file ahead of you and cause problems. You can file within 6 months, keep that priority date. Each trademark filing usually is around $1,000 to $2,000 to file it in each country. Patent is the big outlier here. You can see the numbers are wildly different from the other types of IP. Patents take a long time to get. You have to write them up. The formal requirements for a patent application are extensive in every country. It takes a while to write them up. I usually quote 2 to 3 months on average just to prepare the patent application. most countries, the patent application sits at the patent office for about a year before they do anything with it. Then you enter what's called the substantive examination phase, where the patent office tells you that your invention is not patentable, and you argue back and say, yes, it is. Somewhere between 1 and 3 years later, you've agreed on what is patentable and your patent issues. Patents also have the strictest requirement on extending from one country to another. If you file in the US today, you have to file in any other countries you want within 1 year. After that, you essentially lose the possibility of getting patent protection in other countries, because your own patent filing can count as prior art against your extended patent filing. So again, if you file in Israel today, if you want protection in the US, you need to file in the US within a year of that initial filing, or you will most likely lose the chance of doing that. There's ways to extend that through what's called a patent cooperation treaty filing. You might hear that called an international patent. That's a misnomer. A PCT filing does not ever become a patent. It just lets you pay some money to the World Intellectual Property Organization to extend that 1 year out to about 30 months typically. Each patent application on average costs $10,000 to $15,000 once you count up attorney fees to prepare it, US or other government filing fees to file it. That's for one patent application filed in one country. Basically multiply that for the number of countries you're interested in, although extending an already existing patent application to other countries usually is cheaper than a full filing. For example, if you file in Israel to begin with, and then you want to extend an existing filing to the US, that's usually only about $2,000 to $3,000, presuming the application is in good shape and appropriate for the US Patent Office. I'll pause here as a good opportunity. I know I went through that relatively quickly, but we have a lot more interesting stuff to cover coming up, and see if anybody has any questions at this point. All right, hearing no immediate urgent questions, I will forge ahead. Okay, what does all this mean? How do you use any of this to actually build your business value? And I will say my approach to IP is a bit different than some IP attorneys. The standard kind of black box, turn the crank machine approach to IP is you as a business have some IP you need protected. You hand it off to your IP attorney. They go through the appropriate steps to get your patent or trademark or copyright protected. Hand you back the IP at the end of that, and you say thank you very much. When I talk to a new client, I am as much interested in what their business is and how it works as I am in what their IP is, because I found this over my entire career. A patent that I get for a client knowing nothing about their business has much less value to them in the end than a patent that I get when I understand their business fully, because a patent or a trademark is just a tool for doing something else of business value, right? You have some other business goal. Nobody ever says, hey, let's start a new business, and first thing we do, let's get some trademarks and let's get some patents. And that's our goal, is to end up with a stack of trademarks and patents. Nobody ever says that, right? They say, our goal is to build the best airplane possible, or to build the best new web service that we can, and get business that way. And here's how we're going to make money. And along the way, trademarks and patents and other IP are a way to support and push forward that business goal. So we want to use our IP in that appropriate way. All IP, whether you talk to a trademark, patent, IP attorney or not, adds value to your business, right? Even if you don't register your trademark, you can get common law rights in a trademark. It will still build your brand. It will still help people associate your name with your good value that you provide. But registered IP goes a step further. So trademarks and patents especially, normally we talk about registering IP, primarily talking about patents and trademarks. They will protect your markets by stopping other people from entering them. Even if people can enter them, like I said, you can't stop people from doing everything. You can never stop them from competing with you in one form or another, but it makes it harder. It makes it more expensive for them to do, which means you have a head start. You can build your brand, build your business while they're still trying to figure out how to get around your patents and trademarks. It builds the brand value itself. You know, a lot of companies, they don't have an entirely new form of business or an entirely new technology. In fact, it's very rare to have entirely new technology, but they have a new approach to it. So they have a brand that all of this protects. A lot of the value, especially of mature startups, is in the brand that they've built already, whether it's just internally in the startup community or in the larger market they're going to enter. And then the last thing you can do, you can always stop exact copycats in one form or another, which is a huge value when you've got a new company. You can stop somebody from just copying it immediately and launching 2 months after you launched and doing all the same things you're doing. To get the full value, like I said, you can get some of that value without ever talking to an IP attorney or ever registering any form of IP at all. To get the full value from it, you want to register it to show that you are serious about protecting your IP. And so that you know when somebody comes to talk to you for whatever reason, what IP you have, what its value is, and how it links into your business goals. If you're talking to a potential partner, potential investor, potential acquirer, or a competitor, and you know, okay, I've got these things patented, they've been patented for this long, goes back to this priority date, I've got these things trademarked, we own this segment of the market through our IP, you're in a much stronger position for any of those conversations than you are if you have that IP, but you don't have it cataloged and registered. Competitors, especially competitors that are IP savvy, will pay a lot more attention to somebody that says, look, I've got 3 patents on this field, I've got this area locked up with my trademarks, we've got patent filings over here, and by the way, you'll never figure out how we do it anyway because we've got that locked up with trade secrets, than they will with somebody that can't give that presentation to them. So how do we actually do that, right? It's one thing to say all this brings value and you should record it and you should register it and so on. How do you actually do it? Well, easy answer, you talk to an IP attorney, but that doesn't tell you very much, right? So let's do some examples of what a good IP attorney will help you do with this IP. So the first thing is what I like to call the patent picket fence. So this needs a little bit more in-depth explanation of patents themselves. Imagine you have some invention. I'll give you a specific example in a little bit. You've got an invention. You go to your IP attorney. You say, hey, I need a patent on this. It's a brand new device, brand new software. Help me get a patent. Well, you can do that. You can file a single patent on your invention, and that will protect that invention. Now your top competitor comes along and they say, okay, they've got a patent on their invention, but I would like to do basically the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to my IP attorney and say, hey, how strong is their patent? Where can I get around it? What can I do to avoid this? And their IP attorney will look at the patent and say, well, their claims, the claims are the section of the patent that defines the invention, the legal definition of the invention. They'll say, well, their claims are limited to, a widget that has 5 prongs on it. Leave 1 off, only have 4, and you avoid the patent entirely, right? So instead of having 1 patent, what you want is a handful of patents, possibly all from the same invention, that build a picket fence around your invention. Instead of putting a flagpole on the hill and claiming the hill that way, you put the flagpole and then you build a picket fence around the flagpole. So what happens is every time somebody finds a way around a patent claim or an individual patent, they run into another one. So that's multiple patents, IP assets that protect a key product or product field or technology. You have individual patents directed to single components. Again, I'll give you a specific example on the next slide. So that you don't have just one single patent that protects the whole invention. You have 1 patent or 1 patent claim that protects 1 piece, 1 patent or patent claim that protects another piece, and those lock together to protect the whole thing. How does that work in a specific example? Here's an example. Let's suppose your invention is a toaster that uses less energy than a typical toaster, and it has a new toast raising mechanism. Instead of the toast popping up and startling your cat and causing them to jump off the counter and knock over everything else, it raises up slowly and a nice glow arises from the toaster to say, oh, look, your toast is done. Welcome to the day, right? So the basic patent you file might cover the entire toaster with all of those features put in. The claims cover the energy efficiency, they cover the new way to raise it, they cover the glow mechanism. All of those things are claimed in the patent. And again, when I say claimed, that's what the patent protects. Anything that's in the claims is what you can stop other people from doing. So the claims cover the whole toaster. And then the next patent you file covers only that gentle raising mechanism. It doesn't protect anything else. It protects just that. Now, why is that valuable? It seems like it's protecting less. Yes, it is, which is a good thing for patents. It's a more specific claim. So now, even if somebody doesn't have the energy efficiency, they only have a toaster that just has this new raising mechanism, they still infringe your patent. Patent number one, they have to have all of those features in their device to infringe the patent. Patent number two, they just need the raising mechanism. Patent number three, similarly, all we protect is the energy efficiency. We literally say this patent protects a toaster that has X level of energy efficiency. Now, if somebody builds a toaster that is that energy efficient, regardless of how it raises the toast, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of how it heats the toast, if it's that energy efficient, they infringe your patent. It doesn't matter about the rest. Patent number four might be what's called a design patent, which protects just the look of a device, not the functionality. So if you have a very cool thing, now this is a pretty standard toaster that I've got in the image, but imagine you had a nice new toaster shape with some waves on the side that nobody's ever used for a toaster before. You can protect just how that toaster looks. So now if you get a copycat that says, well, I can't copy their energy efficiency, I can't copy the nice raise mechanism, but you know what? I can fool people. I'll make my toaster look just like theirs, even though it doesn't have any of the features. And so people will buy my toaster because it looks like the one that they really want, but it's half the price. Nope, you've got a design patent that protects how it looks. So now you can stop them from making that copycat toaster that just looks the same, but doesn't function the same. Patent number five might be something you discover along the way that you described in your initial patent, but you didn't even realize was cool. Maybe as you sell your toaster, you realize people really like the handle that we've got. And the reason we could use the new handle is because of this raising mechanism. Hey, let's file a patent on that. It's based on patent number one, so we get the same priority date. So now we can stop people from building a toaster that has just that handle, regardless of anything else in it. Again, stopping people from getting around your invention by omitting features. You cover every feature individually so that even if they get around patent number one, you catch them with patent number three or number five along the way. I realize that's glossing over a whole lot of detailed patent law. We will have plenty of time for questions on that if anybody is interested. But the key takeaway here is you don't have to have a single patent that protects an invention. You can have a whole thicket of patents that protects any of your inventions, that makes it much harder for somebody to get around them, and therefore protects your invention in a much stronger way than is possible with a single patent. Another possibility in the patent realm is to target your competitors. So when you're developing your toaster, you might have some other ideas that you think of and you say, hey, instead of having the conventional toaster goes up and down, what if the sides of the toaster, like in the image shown here, what if the sides just folded out and you just set the bread in that way? Well, we don't want to make that right now, but it's a neat idea. We're not going to pursue it. That's a conventional business process that happens all the time in technology development, right? You have some ideas, you discard them. But maybe you know that even though you're not going to pursue this, your competitors might want to pursue this, especially when they can't copy your toaster. The fact that you're not selling it doesn't stop you from filing a patent on that idea. You've had the idea, you can develop it enough that you can convey to somebody how to make this. So file a patent on it. Now, if one of your competitors says, you know what, we can't get their cool energy efficient soft raised toaster, but we can accomplish the same thing with this side folding toaster. Wait a second, they've got a patent on that. Why in the world do they have a patent on that? They're not selling it. That's the response you want. You have stopped them from building the device that they want to because you thought of it first and you protected it with a patent. Again, it protects your ultimate business goal of owning this new toaster by creating IP that protects the toaster that you want and protects your business goals. Going even further, something that we call a toaster might cover other devices that people might call a toaster oven or a camp stove or other things that wouldn't be a toaster. If you work with your patent attorney and tell them, look, I want to cover this energy efficient device that creates toasted bread, they will say, great, let's write the patent application so that it covers any way you might do that, whether or not it looks like a toaster at all, right? We've got your cool heating elements, you've got your cool energy efficiency. Let's get the patent broad that way. And that's why I say a good patent attorney wants to understand your business, not just understand your invention. Because if they know that you want to own the space of toasting bread for breakfast, they can get you patents that protect that business goal, not just the specific patent, specific toaster that you invented. Here's another strategy. This deals with trademarks, and there's a trend in design lately to give companies what the designers call a menu option or mix and match logo option. If you look at the bottom of the slide, pretend your brand new company, Nuco, Widgets for Life is your logo, right? And you come up with this cool 4-diamond logo. Your designers have, and they say, well, wait, there's no reason we have to use all this together. We can split it up, and sometimes you can use just some of the diamonds, or just a couple of the diamonds, or just one diamond, and you can put your name next to it. Or they might even say, omit your name entirely eventually. Maybe put the widgets here, maybe shorten your logo, whatever it is, and they'll give you all these options. What they don't tell you is, for trademark protection, the use of your logo needs to be done in conjunction with the goods and services you're offering. So if you start using these randomly, you can actually hurt your trademark protection. Let's say that you use the first one of these on all your websites, but then for your published materials, your marketing materials, you don't want this whole thing. So you just go over and use this third option here, where it's just got the faded purple diamond behind Nuco. And you use that with all of your published marketing materials. And then maybe for your actual devices, your actual product packaging that you send out, you use this middle one that somebody in the packaging department happens to like, and it happens to fit neatly onto the boxes. Now when the time comes and you say, well, we've got trademark protection for this, your trademark attorneys are going to look at you and say, wait, which one did you use, and when did you use it, and with what? Because again, the trademark that you want protection for has to be used in conjunction with the goods and services that you're seeking protection for. So what you want to do, and a better way to do this, is have clear guidelines of when you use which logo. And you can use this to get protection for something you might not otherwise get protection for. Let me explain that, because this is a very powerful technique that you can use. Let's assume for the moment that you want to use this fourth logo that's shown here, Nuco, widgets, right? Widgets, when you go to the trademark office and you say, I want to use the term widgets in front of a purple diamond, in front of a diamond, in conjunction with widgets, the trademark office will say, that's very nice, but you can't trademark that because it's too descriptive. And you say, what do you mean? And you say, well, imagine if Microsoft wanted to trademark the name Windows for selling home windows. They would prevent anyone from describing what they sell, right? You can't do that. You can't trademark a word that describes the thing that it's trademarking, which is why they use Windows for software, right? That wasn't, at the time they did it, that wasn't a natural match. But as you build up brand recognition, you can get what's called secondary meaning for some of these things, like Widgets for Life especially. You might be able to get secondary meaning associated with. After your trademark's been out there long enough, people will come to associate Widgets for Life or widgets in front of a diamond with your new widgets that you've been selling for a while. At that point, you can go to the trademark office and say, look, this has been out there for 5 years. We've been using it consistently. Every time we sell our widgets, it's got widgets in front of a diamond. Everybody knows that the word widgets in front of a diamond is associated with our widgets, not everybody else's widgets. At that point, the trademark office will say, yeah, we get it. Everything out there in the market, every time there's widgets in front of a diamond, it's your stuff. So we'll give you trademark protection for this. Now when your competitor says, hey, they can't trademark widgets, we'll call our things widgets too, and we'll use a different color diamond behind it. Well, you got protection for widgets in front of any diamond. And your competitor will be very surprised to find out that you've developed secondary meaning for this term that they thought they could use. But because you used it consistently throughout your product's life cycle and lifetime, you've developed the secondary meaning for it. Again, this takes intentional use and careful thought on your part. You want to make sure to convey to your marketing team and your packaging teams and whoever else it may be, here's how we use our trademarks. Here's when you use each form of it. Here's how you describe our goods and services whenever you're using the trademark. It makes your trademark a lot stronger, a lot harder for other people to attack, and reinforces. Again, this is tied to your business strategy, right? It reinforces when people see Nuco and a diamond, you want them to think, ah, that's those widgets that I love, that Nuco produces, right? So it's all linking your business strategy with your IP protection. Okay, we could go on with lots of specific examples for longer than we have available. So here are some high level types of strategies that you might tie, again, to your business strategy. And I'm talking long-term business strategy at this point. Even your potential exit. If you have a startup company and your goal is to sell in an acquisition, or your goal is to build up a long-term, ongoing concerned company, you will have different strategies for that. So let's say you have a single brand new product. You've got the next fidget spinner, right? You have one product for this company, but you've got to move fast. You want to sell this, but you want to own that single, you want to own the fidget spinner, right? Your strategy here is going to be focused patents directed to that specific product. Now, patents will take longer to get than a fidget spinner is going to be the hot new thing that people want, but you can get back damages for it. So you have focused patents that protect that exact fidget spinner, that new device, and you just completely cover that. You don't worry about anything else necessarily. You've got a single product, you protect it as strongly as you can with patents. Let's say your business strategy next on here is ongoing steady growth, multiple products. It's not just the fidget spinner. You have, a whole range of toasters or a whole range of cell phone covers, right? With new materials in them. Two things you want to do. You want to have an exhaustive trademark strategy that matches your branding to your products. Maybe some of the cell phone covers are for iPhones and some are for Androids, and you might want slightly different branding for those two because it goes after slightly different markets. You want that to be set out from the beginning so people always recognize those brands with those products. Where possible, because you've got multiple products here and patents are very expensive, you want to get reasonable patent protection for those. Again, this will be true regardless of what your ultimate goal is for the business. You want some reasonable coverage for those new devices. If you've got a new cell phone cover that has this new shock resistant material that you developed in it, you might want two brands for iPhone and Android, and you might want a set of patents that cover that material regardless of your branding, right? The patents are going to cover the material and the device. And that way it gets you across brand coverage for that. Next example, let's say you develop software in a very specialized industry. You do tax software targeted to people that are selling automobile parts, right? Second party automobile parts. You're not really developing new inventions. Your branding is very targeted at that specific industry, but it's all back-end software. This isn't something that end users are going to see. It's all going to be used in back offices somewhere. Nobody's going to know what you're doing in your software. They license the software, that's all they get to see. Here, you don't need to worry so much about patents. You might not even need to worry so much about trademarks because a lot of your trademark might be through the secondary meaning where people love the software, they come to associate your name with that software. What you do want is a strong trade secret program because this is all back-end stuff. You don't want people to figure out how you're doing the magic that you do to get them better tax results. So insofar as you can, given the tax laws are public, but the way you calculate it quickly and efficiently, people might not be able to figure out. You want strong trade secrets for that. Moving on to these last two, let's talk about a little bit about what your goals are for the business itself. If you are looking to be acquired by some large player in your space, your goal is, we know within 5 years, Microsoft will want to buy this business because it targets Microsoft Office Online and they will want to incorporate this. You want a very specific patent and trademark strategy for that. And here I put aggressive but relevant. So good rule of thumb is in an acquisition, the more patents a business has, the more valuable it is, especially for startups where a lot of your value is prospective. You may have a set of users and customers, but you expect that it's going to grow after the acquisition. The acquirer expects it's going to grow. But the more patents and trademarks you have, the more valuable the company is. I've seen and helped many clients where the bulk of the value at the time they're acquired is in their IP portfolio. But I say aggressive but relevant. I've seen, being on the acquirer side and doing valuations of the potentially acquired businesses, I've seen many cases where we can tell 6 months to a year before they started talking to somebody to get acquired, all of a sudden there was this huge explosion of patent and trademark filings, usually patent filings, but sometimes both. And we look into the details of what they filed, and there's not really that much innovation happening. There's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of questionable innovation in those patent filings. And it's clear they were doing it just to pump up their patent numbers. Well, we don't assign the same value to those patent filings as we would a continuous, steady growth that matches the acquired company's businesses. The more relevant it is, the more value we're going to assign to that. On the other hand, if you're not looking to get acquired, but you're looking to dominate your market, you're not looking for your new software to get acquired. You're looking to be the name in that area of software or that new device, whatever it is. You still want aggressive filings, aggressive patent filings, aggressive trademark filings, but you might actually look for things that are not as relevant. You might branch out, like I mentioned in an earlier slide. You might target your competitors more so that you're prepared when they launch their new product. You immediately send them a letter saying, like, that's a neat product. By the way, we have patents that cover that. And now they have to license your patents in order to go forward with their business. You might launch more brands than you would otherwise because you want to dominate this market segment. You might file more trademarks on the same brand than you would otherwise because you want that brand to be active in more areas than you would otherwise if you're just looking for an earlier acquisition. The last two slides just kind of sum up. How do you do all of this at a high level? Well, you're going to want to talk to your in-house attorneys. You're going to want to talk to your outside IP attorneys. But really, you want IP to be part of your business plan. You want to identify early and often areas of business value and innovation and branding. You want to incorporate in your checklist of product development lifecycle, their product development, an IP check. Okay, did we innovate here? Did we invent anything new? Do we have any branding that needs to be developed here? Any trademarks that need to be filed? Make sure that your engineers, your marketing people know that this is a requirement and talk to the appropriate people internally. You want to identify trade secrets versus patent candidates. If you have a new invention, you don't necessarily want to patent it. You might want to keep it as a trade secret. On the other hand, you might need to patent it as early as you can because you know as soon as it gets out there, people will know how to copy it, even if you don't tell them anything about it. Just by looking at the device, by using the software, they will know how to copy it. You absolutely want to patent that. You want to identify it, make that distinction as early as you can. And then you also want to monitor your competitors' activity, not just to see if you can cover them with your own IP, but also to see what they're doing in terms of IP. Are they filing patents on things that we care about, where we know they're going to be calling us up and saying, hey, that's a neat product, but by the way, we have patents that cover it. Are they developing brands that conflict with yours? Do we want to oppose their trademarks and stop them from getting trademarks that look similar to ours? Last takeaway is IP is a resource. I know it shows up on a lot of balance sheets and financial analyses as a cost, but you're buying something for that cost. You're buying protection for what may be very key components of your business. So it's a resource that you use like all other resources. Fit it into your business strategy, figure out where you can get value from it, and invest in it appropriately. Incorporate IP reviews into regular business practices. IP should not be something you tack on once everything else is done. The earlier you think about IP, the better your protection will be, the cheaper you'll get it, and the more value it'll bring to your business later on. And then the last thing, file early and often. The earlier you look at filing trademark and patent protection, the better situated you will be to take advantage of that protection. So I think I'm a little over, sorry about that, but mostly we're on time. I know I went through a lot of things quickly, but I'm happy to talk about those in as much detail as people want. I could talk for half an hour on any one of those slides. So what questions can I answer for everyone?
Well, to get the questions started, we actually have a question on the message board. If your patent, maybe even a seminal patent, is violated, what are the steps to protect the patent, and how does the value of the violation evaluated by the court?
Good questions. So how do you protect it? Really, a patent doesn't really need protection itself. So I think what the question is intended to ask, I'll say a bit about trademarks in a minute that relates to that. What we're really saying is, how do you use the patent to protect that innovation, to protect, to deal with this infringement, right? So for anybody who's not as familiar with patents, what's really happening here is you've obtained a patent on your inventions. Someone is infringing it. That means they are making, using, selling, or importing a device that is covered by your patent, that your patent claims. How do we deal with that? Essentially, ultimately, you sue them for infringement. You bring a cause of action in the appropriate court, and you say, court, this person is infringing my patent. They should either be forced to take a license and or pay me royalties for their use of it, or be made to stop doing what they're doing. Those remedies are available in different jurisdictions to different degrees, but they're all available to some extent. Before that, you might just send them a letter, and this is pretty common, where you say, hey, we noticed that you're doing X. We have a patent that infringes that. You need to stop, and by the way, let's talk about licensing. That's pretty common. Ultimately, you either have to negotiate something with the infringer or sue them and obtain remedies that way, either damages or injunctions, or whatever the case may be. The value of violation, how is it evaluated by the court, is an incredibly complex topic, but some rules of thumb. Basically, what dollar value does the patent read on of their infringement, and how much does the use of their use of your patented invention, how much does it contribute to their profits, at a very high level. Now, there's actually, I think there's a 12-point test for this that's used by the courts, and then there's a limitless number of things that they can take into consideration. But let's take a simple example. Let's say you have a patent on a device, again, very simple device, a fidget spinner, a toaster. You have a patent on that. They're selling something that exactly copies your patent. No other work goes into it. It's an exact copy of your patent. The value of their violation will be judged based on their profits from that. That's going to be the top criteria that's used by the court to judge it. Now, when you get into something more complicated, again, like a cell phone, if you have a patent on how the screen refreshes in a cell phone, somebody does not pay $1,000 for a cell phone based on how quickly the screen refreshes, right? And the courts recognize that. They will say, look, we've determined through a very complicated analysis and a lot of expert declarations and expert interviews that this patent contributed 0.015% to the total value of the cell phone. And so you would then add up how much the company got from all the cell phones they sold, multiply by 0.015%, and that's the total damages. Now, again, I'm glossing over thousands and thousands of pages of expert reports and back and forth in court. But ultimately, that's the type of analysis that happens. I'll just go on through the questions in chat. If that didn't completely answer your question, please toss more details into chat, and I will address them there. The next question is, do you recommend filing provisionals? Yes, but not always. I'll say more in a minute. If yes, do you also recommend using with such a similar strategy of patent picket fence in non-provisional applications? That one, yes, absolutely. So do I recommend filing provisionals? If you have the time and money to file non-provisionals directly, most of the time I would recommend just filing a non-provisional. The reason I say that is the best provisional looks exactly like a non-provisional and is just filed as a provisional, because a provisional patent only gives you a priority date for whatever is written, disclosed in the provisional filing. So if you do what some people call a cover sheet provisional or a quick provisional that doesn't have all the details for it, it doesn't provide you as much support as a full filing does. Well, at that point, if you're going through the time, money, and effort of making the full description that is necessary to provide full support in the non-provisional, you might as well file it as a non-provisional. Now, for business strategies, there are reasons to file a provisional anyway. I have several clients that always file a provisional first. And it's for a couple of reasons. One is they very quickly evaluate their inventions. They might decide not to pursue a lot of their inventions as non-provisionals. So it saves money in that way, but it still secures an early filing date. And they file very thorough provisionals. You might not want to spend the money right up front for all of the inventions you have. So you might want to file them as provisionals. And you also, there's some clever things you can do with filing dates and getting extra damages if you're definitely going to sue people where you might want to file provisionals. But for the most part, provisionals are a tool to use when you don't have the time or money to invest in a full patent filing. If you do, I'd suggest it's a full patent filing. Regardless of how you do it, you can still build the patent picket fence. So let's say you do file provisionals. The neat thing about provisionals is there's no requirement to file one-to-one provisionals to non-provisionals. So one thing you can do to take advantage of the picket fence strategy, you file one large provisional that includes multiple inventions in it, multiple potential inventions in it. A year later, you have the option of filing non-provisional applications that claim priority to that provisional. You could file one big non-provisional that duplicates everything in the provisional, or you could file as many non-provisionals as you want that all claim priority to that provisional. So that single provisional filing can act as the genesis for your picket fence strategy, where you have X number of non-provisionals come out of the single provisional filing. You can also use provisionals to potentially keep some things secret. So let's say you have 10 inventions. You're not sure which of them are going to go forward, but the ones that don't, you don't want to publish. You could file all 10 inventions in 10 separate provisionals if you want. The provisional buys you a year within which you have to file non-provisional applications. Each non-provisional can become its own, or each provisional can become its own non-provisional, and each non-provisional can claim priority to as many of those provisionals as you want. So within that year, let's say you figure out, ooh, 3 of these inventions, really cool, but we should keep them as trade secrets. Those 3 provisionals, you don't file any non-provisionals that claim priority to them. Provisional applications that have no priority claim to them later never publish. They're never made public. So you don't claim priority, they disappear into the ether, nobody ever knows that you filed them, and you keep those inventions as trade secrets. The other provisionals, maybe you claim, and non-provisionals, maybe you don't. So yes, they can absolutely be used as part of the picket fence. I should probably backstep for anybody who isn't familiar with a provisional filing. That's a unique filing in the US where you can file essentially anything you want as a provisional patent application. It doesn't have any of the formal requirements of a regular patent application. It secures you a filing date and whatever disclosure is in the provisional that you hand to the patent office. It can literally be a PowerPoint presentation that has the high points of your invention. They'll accept that as a provisional. It lasts for 1 year, and within 1 year, you can file as many patent applications as you want that claim priority to that provisional. Those applications are all treated as if they have the filing date of the provisional application for whatever material is in the provisional. So it's essentially a way to buy a year where maybe you're not sure if or what you want to file, and to secure an early filing date before you have time to develop it. It's also a way, let's say, and I've had this happen many times, a client calls me up and says, Aaron, I'm about to present my invention at a public gathering tomorrow, but I haven't filed a patent on it. In every country of the world except the US, once you publicly disclose your invention, you can't file patent applications on it. It is publicly known. You can no longer get patent protection for the most part. So you need to file something. A provisional is the answer to that. What you do is you take the PowerPoint, the presentation, the white paper, whatever it is that's going to be public tomorrow, you file it today as a provisional, you lock in the filing date of today, and now you're protected. In almost every country in the world will recognize the provisional filing date for whatever's in it. And now you can go on, give your presentation. You don't have to worry about things becoming public. So that's another use of a provisional filing. Let's see, the next question. Is there any type of innovation you wouldn't recommend to issue a patent on? That again could be a complicated question. So let's start at a high level. Generally, presuming it's relevant to your business, no, there is not. There are some places, some types of innovations that are harder to get patent protection for. Business methods these days is the top one. You have a new method, I'll use the classic example of patent law, a new method of hedging risk. A lot of countries don't like that sort of patent because they say it's a business method or it's human activity you're trying to get a patent on. In the US, it was possible to get those sorts of patents for many years. Right now, it is possible, but very difficult to get patents on pure business methods. That is, there's no technology involved at all. Technically, you can't get a patent on that sort of innovation in many countries in the world. You have to tie it to some sort of technical development. So there, a lot of times, although you could file a patent application, it may not be worth the time and effort and cost that it will take to actually pursue that application through whatever patent office you file it. The other type of innovation that I would caution clients on filing is one that is kind of on the border of being appropriate for a trade secret, or that is more likely to be held as a trade secret. Again, if you have an invention that you're going to use and that brings you business value, but nobody will ever be able to tell what the invention is or how it works. The back-end algorithm is a classic example. Another example is, let's say you have a closed manufacturing plant that has a new technique for fabricating something, or for fabricating a new chemical, let's say. Maybe you're going to patent the chemical itself, because people will be able to see that when it gets out in the world. You can't escape that. They'll see the chemical. But the way you make it, they might not have any easy way to figure out, even by reverse engineering, by taking apart the chemical formulation, or it might take them a very long time to figure that out. And we're not sure they'd be able to at all. That one requires a really careful analysis on whether or not you file the patent on the process of making that chemical. Because if nobody could ever figure out how you do it, the only way they'll figure it out is from your own patent filing. So maybe you just don't file that patent. Patents only last for 20 years. So if somebody's not going to be able to figure out how to do it, don't file the patent, because 20 years from now, your patent expires and now they get to use the process that you told them how to perform. On the other hand, this is a good example. Most chemicals, given enough time, clever chemists will figure out a way to make them, right? Some way to synthesize it. If the only reasonable way to do it is by your potentially trade secret process, even if it's not going to happen for 10 years, you might want to file a patent on it now. You probably should file a patent on it now, because 10 years from now, if you've kept it as a trade secret, if somebody else independently figures out how to do it, your trade secret is no longer worth anything, right? Trade secrets only protect you from people stealing your trade secret. They don't protect you from somebody independently, without looking at your secret stuff, figuring out how to do it. So things like that, we take a good deal of time to figure out, okay, can somebody figure out how to do this? If so, how long will it take? How much effort will it take? Should we file this as a patent? Should we keep it as a trade secret? Beyond that, the other thing I see for larger clients, they'll have a lot of employees that come up with inventions that are not really related to their businesses. And they will oftentimes look to file patents on that. The employees will. For that, you want a good internal screening process, right? You don't want to send every potential invention out to file a patent on it, because your employee might have come up with a really cool way to do something that's not related to your patent. Maybe your business is in steel processing. Some of your employees figured out a really cool way to extend Microsoft Office that you could patent. That's great, but do you really care? Are you really going to sue people for extensions to Microsoft Office when you're really worried about developing steel products? Probably not. Are you going to spend the time and money to have me go find people to license your patent, which is not cheap? Probably not. Why are you spending money on that patent, right? There's no business justification for it. So that's kind of a catch-all. Anything that doesn't have a business justification, I wouldn't recommend filing a patent on, even if you could. I realized, not seeing any other questions in chat. Let me go back to the first question. I said I would get to something later, and I didn't. Talking about protecting the patent in that question. Patents themselves don't have to be enforced to have value. Typically, you can choose who to sue for infringement with a patent. You can let people infringe your patent and not sue them for a while. Now, if that goes on long enough, they might raise a claim of what's called latches to say, look, they knew I was infringing their patent for 10 years and they did nothing about it. But for general purposes, you don't have to sue everybody you see that might be infringing your patent. Trademarks work a little differently. trademarks derive some of their value from the fact that there is consistent sourcing for anything that the trademark is on. So when we see a trademark, we expect that it tells us where those goods come from. If somebody is infringing your trademark, let's say they exactly copy it, and you do nothing about it, or let's say many people are using marks that look similar but not identical to your trademark, and you do nothing at all. Over time, your trademark will lose value because courts or the trademark office or whomever will say, look, there are 10 brands out there that look very similar to this brand. Let's go back in my slides if I can here. Let's say that this first mark is your mark, and other people without the NUCO, they have a different name, but they're using this mark, right, with the 2 diamonds, one above the other, and their company name, maybe their name is Nextco or just Next. It's similar but not identical to yours, and you do nothing about that. You say, yeah, that's not the same. They're in a similar business to us. Their products are similar, but we just don't want to take the time to send them a threat letter or to sue them or to oppose their trademark or to do anything. Let's say there's somebody else that their mark looks like this, but their Never is the name. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar. And you do nothing for that. And this builds up years, over years, you've done nothing. Now, when the time comes and you want to sue somebody that's using this fourth mark, that again, it's not NUCO, but it's similar and it looks similar to yours. And you say, hey, you're infringing our trademark. You can't do that. The first thing they're going to say, I guarantee it, they will go to court and they'll say, look, all of these other marks that look just as similar to their mark as ours does, have been out there for years. They've done nothing about it. Over time, this has gotten muddied in people's minds. People don't associate every single thing that has these diamonds on it and a name that looks like this with NUCO. They know that there's a lot of marks that look the same. So we're not infringing anything, right? Their mark is very narrowly protected just for their exact mark. There's no similarity extension. And there's a chance they'll win if you have not done something to stop people from using marks similar to yours. So there is some requirement that you enforce trademarks, especially the closer somebody else's use is to yours, the more likely you need to do something about it, whether it's send them a letter, a cease and desist letter, oppose their trademark filing, actually sue them for infringement, something like that, to actually protect the trademark itself. Some classic examples of this that we sort of, Xerox was one for a long time. So we say, hey, can you go Xerox this for me? They didn't mean go find a Xerox brand copier and copy this, right? They meant make me a copy of it. But people used Xerox for a long time. That the Xerox trademark in that we call it, got diluted over time so that it wasn't as strong as it would have been if they had stopped people from using that. Another classic example is Kleenex. People say, hand me a Kleenex. They don't mean hand me a Kleenex brand tissue. They mean hand me a tissue, right? They don't care what brand it is. But people have said Kleenex for so long that a lot of people say that mark has probably lost a lot of its value because it no longer applies to the Kleenex brand tissues. It applies to any tissue anywhere. So it's probably gone down in value from that. Some of that you can't stop, right? You can't stop how people use it, other than if somebody's writing an article about your product and they talk to you, you say, hey, by the way, don't say Kleenex, say Kleenex brand tissue or Kleenex tissue. Every time you mention us in the article, make sure you say we sell Kleenex brand tissues, right? And that will help protect your mark, the mark itself, not just the logo that the mark is protecting. Any other questions? Again, I'm happy. You can probably tell I'm happy to talk about these things and can go on as long as you let me.
Well, I guess if there is no further questions, we'll go ahead and close. Ira and Ellie, thank you so much for putting this together today. It was excellent. And Aaron, on behalf of Paul Merage, the Merage Institute, thank you so much for enlightening our tribe today. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. And as always, don't hesitate if anybody has follow-up questions. If you're not sure what in the world I was talking about as I rambled on, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks.